bad the Democrats are doing right now, okay? They have zero leadership. But again, you have some people that are plotting to protest during his speech. Okay, this is what they're plotting to do. Democratic lawmakers are discussing a litany of options to protest at President Trump's speech to Congress on Tuesday, including through outright disruption. A half dozen House Democrats told Axios. I guarantee you, this is probably the ghetto caucus, right? The ghetto Democrats are probably the ones that are going to be kicking and screaming and crying and shouting and hooping and hollering as the president is talking to the American people. Some of these tactics go beyond their leader's recommendation that members bring guests hurt by Trump and Doge. This sets up a potential clash between party traditionalists and its more combative anti-Trump wing. Quote, the part that we all agree on is that this is not business as usual, and we would like to find a way productively to express our outrage, one House Democrat told Axios. There's a widespread disagreement among Democrats, both inside and outside of Congress, over what will be the most appropriate and effective form of demonstration. Some members have told colleagues they may walk out of the chamber when Trump says specific lines they find.
and negotiate with a line of effective
of this decision. Let's hear their reaction.
Я вважаю, що якби вони
Check, check. Right, check. Okay. Just about ready to get going here. See what we got. Okay. Here we go. Once again, Corner Speak, myself, Owen Uadier, and there's been so much going on in the news lately. I think it kind of kicked off from about Saturday when the regular meeting took place, which I think everybody knows about now. You're going to see a few clips. As a matter of fact, I'll see if I can find one right now, just as a recap, as it's the, how can we say, it's what's behind most of what the varying crisis being based on. Alright, what I really want to do though is catch up from where we are today, because everything's moving so fast, it's hard to keep up with the stories. I had a few videos put aside, mainly to do with how the Zelensky-Trump Oval Office fallout was being resolved. And then, without hesitation, that followed into Starmer finding his moment, stepping in, gathering the UK leaders together. And I thought that was going to be a story on its own, you know, the European version of the peace suggestion. Before that could even get going, well, other things took place. Let me see if I can just find a recap.
Well, after 4 years of Joe Biden, was Zelensky ready for the leadership President Trump exhibited today? Let's bring in Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News.
Let's see.
Where the markets.
Remind ourselves. Oh, what happened on the weekend? UK, probably not there. You have to give me a moment as well. I also want to put up a number, so at some point, if anybody, wherever you're based, feels like you want to join the stream, you can DM me on Instagram. Just look me up under Corner Speak 360, or you can message me. The email address is in the description. chat@cornerspeak.co.uk, and I will send you a link to bring you into the stream. You can give us your 2 pennies worth on this said story. I want to kind of like recap.
Orthodox churches came to town with an impudent, hectoring approach, expecting, I guess, to be treated like he was at Harvard's Kennedy School or maybe at the Oscars. Now think about how other European leaders handled their visits to the White House. Leaders who also have some pretty profound differences with the Trump administration.
With this gentleman on my right, and we look forward to keeping that going for a long period of time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. You're looking nice.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
President.
Oh, they were gracious.
You see, that's another thing that's been about being kind of funny with all of this is after Saturday's blow up, I think some of the news channels and stations that really wanted to give a favorable impression of the whole thing on Zelensky's side, they just played the end. They played the end of the meeting, the last 8 to 10 minutes, and that gave people an out of context view. Following the thing kind of like evolving, I think a lot of people had a chance to look back, and some people actually watched the whole thing to give it real context, which I think is sort of what Laura Ingram's trying to do.
They weren't morons. But any leader, especially a leader who's received, what, about $250 billion? Who's counting? in aid, in arms, and humanitarian aid from the United States, enters the White House and then disrespects the president, well, then you can bet that the 77 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump will not support any further engagement.
I mean, I'd have to repeat myself too much. I kind of said, you know, whatever side you might find yourself on, if you go into somebody's house as a guest, you kind of want to try and act graciously, even if it means you have to bite your tongue from time to time. And then behind closed doors, you deal with the heavy stuff, conversationally speaking.
Zelensky was like an annoying gnat. He never shut up in camouflage. But by about dinner time on the East Coast, Volodymyr Zelensky had a slight attitude adjustment. On set with Brett Baer, there was still no apology for his rude behavior, but...
So I'm not hearing from you, Mr. President, a thought that you owe the president an apology.
No, I respect the president and I respect American people. And if, I don't know, if I think that we have to be very open and very honest. And I'm not sure that we did something bad.
Well, he ended up saying well, he thinks the relationship can be salvaged. He had 2 or 3 chances to say he was sorry. It can be salvaged, and, you know, he is sorry if there was a misunderstanding. He finally got that out of him. That's all well and good. But the man is still not living in reality. We fund and have funded the lion's share of this war, and we're not funding it any longer, period. Trump is driving the negotiations here, and so Zelensky needs to lose the attitude.
Do you think the public spat in the Oval Office in front of the media served Ukrainians well today?
I think this kind of spat is I mean this we have. I mean, this is...
Now, what happened here is immediately after the Oval Office incident, when he's asked to leave, he, I don't know if it was pre-scheduled, he ended up doing this show at Fox, and I'm sure he's still in the moment, and as you see, questions were asked.
Is not good for both sides anyway, and I'm very open, but I can't, you know, change our Ukrainian attitude to Russia, and I don't want they kill us for us. You know, this is very, very clear that Americans are the best of our friends, Europeans are the best of our friends, and Putin with Russian, their enemies. And it doesn't mean that we don't want peace. We just want to recognize the reality, the real situation.
But look, I think the spat in public was actually refreshing.
Yeah.
Now, all these diplomats, all these globalists, the same people who failed America in negotiations and meetings, Iraq, Afghanistan, throughout the Middle East, they love having it all play out behind closed doors. That way there's no accountability when they screw up. But it was very important for America to see Zelensky's intransigence today.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on. I understand, sir. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long.
He knows the show. And sunlight truly is the best disinfectant. And right now, Zelensky and his enablers are the biggest obstacles toward peace.
Well, today was interesting. Zelensky went to the White House and met the fashion police.
Ready clothes? How are you? Ready shut?
He's all dressed up today.
But everybody was getting along fine. Zelensky was there to sign the mineral deal and start peace negotiations. The first 30 minutes went great. Even the reporters were teasing the Ukrainian about his clothes.
Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest. Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if you do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting the dignity of this office.
I will wear costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe one.
Maybe something
like yours. Yes.
That'd be great.
Maybe something better. I don't know.
I do like your clothing, by the way.
Yeah, really.
Even though I have to, I think he's a
Tell you
great
what,
guy, by the way.
I can wait.
I don't know if you two like each other, but you know what? I think
Really and truly,
I think he's good.
I'm going to catch up from earlier today. Now, there was a piece done this evening on Channel 4 News, and they can be slightly one-sided-ish from time to time. Although I believe this particular story I heard was kind of presented in a reasonable way. Let me see if I can just find it. I didn't actually get to watch it all, so I've got a chance. I'll watch some of this through reviews. Right. Let's go back through my history. There we go. Bear with me on this, folks.
Five weeks into Donald Trump's presidency and established norms in war and in trade.
Pause that. That's the one. Excuse the ad interruption.
Gary Gibbon will join me now to discuss all this. Is the Ukrainian...
Right, so before we press on with that, what I'd like to do is give a quick word from our sponsors, Small Debts. If you're UK based and you need some help getting some money that's owed to you, could be a rent deposit, you might have got scammed online with a retail purchase, work you've done, the client is kind of dragging their feet about paying you. Sometimes these things get out of hand and you need somebody, legally speaking, in your corner who know what they're doing. In comes Small Debts.
Have you been unfairly charged or conned by a company? At Small Debts, no company is too big and no debt too small. Small Debts is here to help.
So, if that's you, check them out. Click the link, it's in the description. Right, let's press on. This is Channel 4, Ukraine MP head-to-head with Republican on Trump military aid freeze. And that's the big change in the story. Let's go.
MP Kira Rudik, who's leader of the Liberal Holos Party, and Greg Swenson, who's chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Kira. So it looks as if President Zelensky has been forced to eat humble pie. He's been forced to bow to the will of President Trump. As a Ukrainian member of parliament, how does that make you feel?
Matt, thank you so much for having me. Well, of course, I'm upset that the meeting went the way it went, right? And I know that President Zelensky has Ukraine's best interest in mind. So he does what he has to do. However, it's very upsetting because on a personal level, I can imagine how he felt when he had to stand up to President Trump and J.D. Vance, who are saying what they were saying, and they were wrong.
You would have done the same?
Matt, do you think we would all have done something differently? I think, of course, because he is the president of the country that is at war, and he was trying.
Look, I don't know if she would have done exactly the same, because from what I understand, he was there to really sign the agreement. This gets a little grey. There was talk about him not being actually invited, because they didn't need to do a face-to-face to sign the document. It had all been arranged. He insisted on being there, so they invited him. I don't think he was invited on past invitations to give a speech. And that's when it went a bit off key.
Bring this understanding to people who never been to Ukraine, who didn't understand what's going on.
But the reason why he didn't sign it, presumably, is because what was on the deal was not enough, especially for Ukraine's security. Is the stuff that's on the deal now that he says he is about to sign any different?
We didn't hear anything about the security guarantees. And I think what was the most painful in this Oval Office interaction was that President Trump was saying that him having relations with Putin is enough of the security guarantees. On behalf of Ukrainian people, no, we are not accepting that as security guarantees, the relations between President Trump and Putin.
Greg Swenson, thanks for coming on the program. So it looks as if your kind of mafia-style extortion has finally worked.
Matt, I'm sure people, critics of the president, will use terms like that. But what's really happening here is we're getting closer to a peace deal. The first step is the minerals agreement. It's a step in the right direction. That's going to bring U.S. involvement in Ukraine. It's going to give the U.S. a stake in the upside of Ukraine, and that's a path to security. So I think, after all the screaming last week about, the U.S. should provide a security agreement or a security backstop, we're a lot closer to that, and will be a lot closer to that.
Okay, well, let's see what a Ukrainian, a real one, Kira, has actually got to say about this. Go on.
Greg, what is the way for us to make sure that Putin would not attack us again? And I was in Kiev in 2022 when we had many U.S. companies that was there, and I remember how U.S. embassy was evacuating when Putin attacked. So how this time will be different?
How will it be different, Greg?
Yeah, look, we know that Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 were both failures ultimately. If anything, maybe they bought some time for the Ukrainian army to build, to build up its defenses. But look, it's trust but verify, or I would prefer don't trust and still verify. So of course Putin can't be trusted in general. President Trump thinks this will be different, but what we've tried for the last years, we collectively in the West, has failed, and all it's brought is a stalemate. So I think a different path is probably a constructive thing. Can we trust Putin on his own? Of course not.
But President Trump and J.D. Vance were saying that the presence of U.S. companies after this minerals deal is signed is enough for Putin not to attack. But he already attacked when there were U.S. companies on the ground. Again, I don't get the logic here. Maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a step in the right direction. We can argue over what happened in the past, and I wish it was February of 22 and we could do things differently. I would have preferred if the administration delivered F-16s right away, Abrams tanks right away. Unfortunately, we drip-fed for 3 years. We even held back on some of the financial support that was approved by Congress. So there's been mistakes here, but we have to understand that it's not February of 22 anymore.
But Greg,
we
sorry
have to
to
look
interrupt,
for a new path.
Just to be clear, the reason why some of the stuff, especially last year, was delayed was because of the pressure that President Trump put on his allies in Congress to vote against a deal. That's why the stuff was stuck in the pipeline for 6 months. Hey. And you can excuse the Ukrainians, correct me if I'm wrong, Kira, for not trusting the president when he's called the president of Ukraine a dictator, when he hasn't, clearly declared Russia as the aggressor. The trust has been shredded by none other than your president.
Yeah. Matt, I'd remind you that this started in February of 22. So any pressure during the campaign on the Biden administration, I really challenge that and doubt that. But this started in February of 22. Biden was very apprehensive about sending lethal weapons. So it started with some supplies, and then finally he changed his mind on F-16s. So not only was not supporting with military equipment, he was declining permission of countries like Poland to provide tanks and F-16s. So, and he still never provided the Link 16 program, which connects the communications on the ground with the F-16s, and that's why we're losing great Ukrainian fighter pilots.
Kira wants to come in. Kira?
Greg, do you have a plan for what would happen if Putin wouldn't come to the table, if Putin will break his part of the deal? Is there a plan for that?
Good question, Greg.
Look, it's a great question. We haven't gotten Putin to the table yet. And so there's no guarantee here. And I think the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, did a good job of communicating that over the weekend, that this still depends on Putin. So again, it's a step in the right direction. We can't make progress on peace unless we get everybody to the table. We had Keir Starmer in Washington on Thursday. I think that was a step in the right direction. Zelensky on Friday didn't end well, but it's already turned around. So look, we need to get everybody involved here, including Putin, whether we like it or not, because he's key to this peace agreement.
You're absolutely right there. Kira, you want to come in again?
Greg, if President Trump wants to compensate for some of the expenses that American people had, why is he demanding something from Ukraine and not taking it from Russia? There are $300 billion of Russian money being stored.
I believe there's stages to these things. Trump always said during the campaign that his mandate was to end these two big wars. He did say do it in a day. I think that was just his opening statement. So now he's getting down to it in real time. It's going to take as long as it's going to take, but on his timeline, it's going to be fairly quick. So everything moves in stages. The first stage is, I do believe, he just wants the fighting to stop. Then the other things can be looked into and dealt with systematically. I'm just guessing.
Why not to say that he wants this money? It's faster, better, and more just deal than any kind of rare minerals of Ukraine.
Attention car owners, there's a free tool right here that could get you thousands of pounds in compensation. You see, if you financed a vehicle through PCP or HP from 2007...
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think it's a slippery slope when we start seizing assets and spending.
So slippery. I mean, I don't think Trump is trying to antagonize the Russians, at least at this stage of the negotiation, because as far as holding cards, Ukraine are completely dependent on Europe and America. Russia, they've been on a war footing economically for a while, so they're ready for a long thing. If he gets an agreement with the Ukrainians, then he can turn to Putin, and within their kind of relationship that enables them to communicate without, weapons being involved, he can deal with that as a stage 2.
It's a dangerous game to play, but more importantly, we have to get some concessions, obviously, from Putin and from Russia. There might be some economic deals to do with them, too. And keep in mind, this is a partnership with Ukraine. This is not the U.S. going in and taking assets from Ukraine. No. It's a partnership. Ukraine desperately needs capital from the U.S. to develop.
Also, unlike Biden, Trump wants America to be repaid some of the money that they've given to Ukraine, although it's going to turn into a loan. The Europeans and Great Britain, they lent most of their money. So I think when he discovered or realized that was the arrangement, he's probably thinking, well, we've given just as much. Why do we have nothing in place to say we're going to have some of that money returned to us? And that's when the rare minerals thing came into the mix. Plus, he's looking to get those minerals as part of another sort of bigger picture concept, which is we're in the digital age. All of this AI and tech stuff needs components. And from what I understand, those rare minerals are vital to the components. So why not, for want of a better word, kill two birds with one stone? So there's more to this negotiation than meets the eye. Also, seizing Russia's money, which doesn't actually belong to Ukraine or the European banks who are holding the money, could open up a whole nother can of worms. He wants the fighting to stop, not give either side reasons to keep it going.
Their rare earth elements and their critical minerals, as well as their natural gas assets.
The second largest. First.
Okay,
we want the war to end. We don't need the capital just yet. We want the war to end first.
Okay, listen, I've got a final one for
you.
We
agree on that.
One final one from me, Greg, for you. With everything that Trump and Vance have said and done in recent weeks and months, frankly, people in this country as well as Ukraine are wondering whether America has turned from protector and friend to predator and foe. It's a good question.
At this point, I'd just say, because some of the statements that have been made by J.D. Vance and Trump, I mean, Zelensky, he's been playing the media all along. He'll do the diplomatic thing, and then he'll switch to the media, and he'll run a whole nother storyline to them. So Trump's kind of stepped in and said, yeah, I've given you a bit of play on that. Now we need to get your attention. Stop all supplies that haven't arrived yet to the Ukraine war effort. That got Zelensky's attention. A tweet came out, and now he's starting to sound more favorable to making peace. Prior to that, this was going to take a long time before something like that, he said, we're going to reach any kind of endpoint. That, I think, got Trump in the wrong part of his anatomy, and he reacted. But it got Zelensky's attention and the attention of the Europeans.
Absolutely not, Matt. Absolutely not. One of the great outcomes of this, and President Trump's been talking about it for 8 years, and the Europeans didn't do anything or very little
3 years
to increase their defense and security budget.
Another thing I noticed, since Trump came up with this peace idea, it seems like there's another thing going on where other characters are coming into the mix, and it's like, well, I've got a suggestion for creating peace. So it looks like now you've got this thing where different personalities want to be the one credited with, making peace between the warring factions. What happened over the last 2 years? Any of the Western leaders or anyone else? How come nobody's come up with this? Now everyone's scurrying around to say, we've got a European proposal, we've got a British proposal, we've got all following Trump's entering the arena with plan for peace. So that's another funny observation.
Finally, they are. If what we saw on Sunday here in London
or
here in the UK, it means anything. So, no, this is a great outcome. We want our partners to be stronger. I think President Trump is really happy about this meeting on Sunday, and this will all end well.
Right, we'll see about that. Just in 20 seconds, no longer. Kira, what does America need to do for you to actually feel reassured?
We need real security guarantees. And
if you don't get them, what about troops on the ground, European ones?
We don't know if that would work, right? We need to make sure that there is a comprehensive plan from Europe. That's the most important thing.
Okay. Kira Rudik, Greg Swenson, thank you very much indeed to both of you. And thanks for debating in a civil manner.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to cycle back to BBC, although before we go there, I want you to have a little listen to Al Arabiya English, an interview.
I believe that if the US cared about the population, about the people of Ukraine, about the civilian population, about the people who live in this city, they would not stop providing aid in the form of anti-aircraft missiles, EW defense systems, and so on.
I have hope that Trump could be forgiving. I hope that pausing the aid is a temporary measure, that everything will be fine. I hope that we can do things on our own without Trump. It's not true that we can do nothing, as he said, that we can only hold out for 2 weeks. That's not true, no. But we do really need this help. I hope he finally understands whose side he should be on.
Okay, reaction there on the streets of Kyiv. Well, let's get some more analysis now from Captain Brent Sadler, former US military diplomat, now a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation Center for National Defense, who joins us from DC. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Captain Sadler. Great to have you with us. President Trump, we've heard, has ordered a halt to all military aid to Ukraine. Just want to get your thoughts. Why has he done this? And is this the right thing to have done?
Well, I think, quite frankly, a pause sends a signal. It's not clear if this is going to be a permanent or a ceasing of military or financial assistance to Ukraine. But the pause definitely underscores the significance and the seriousness that President Trump is approaching the ending of hostilities through a negotiated solution, a peace, and hopefully a lasting peace.
Yes, well, obviously it takes two sides to reach that point. I mean, are you of the view that the Russian President Vladimir Putin is also serious about negotiating a fair and realistic peace with Ukraine?
Well, I think that's yet to be seen. I mean, all that's been occurring the last few weeks with the new administration here in D.C. under President Trump, led by General Kellogg, is really a sensing and trying to set the contours and the conditions to which both sides could come to the table for negotiation. Of course, it does take both Ukraine and Russia to want that negotiated solution for it to actually go forward, if it's not to be a delay tactic for rearming and recommencing hostilities. But I think the reality that we have to acknowledge here is that both the Ukrainians and the Russians independently feel that they still have a lot of fight left. So unfortunately, getting to a peace negotiation sooner is probably not going to happen until after there's another series of offensives by both sides.
Yeah, and a rushed conclusion to the war, I mean, it's not likely to result in a lasting conclusion, is it?
The devil's in the details on this, and I think both parties have to come to the table and negotiate what the line of effective control will be, and how that geography, the territory, is actually settled will determine if it actually will be a lasting peace. And neither side's going to get exactly what they want, but both sides have to be in a position that if the other one were to reinstigate hostilities, the cost or the consequences of that on the battlefield, not talking economics, talking about the military reinitiation of hostilities, would be so high that both sides would not dare do it.
Just before we crossed to you, we heard a clip of the US Vice President J.D. Vance speaking to Sean Hannity on Fox News. And one of the other things he said, apart from the clip we aired, was, quote, the Russians are going to have to give up stuff. The Ukrainians are going to give up stuff. But, you know, you could argue, looking at it from the outside, Ukraine has already given up quite a lot of, quote, stuff. And that's been given up on its behalf by the US president, who said, you know, they'll never join NATO, the 20% land.
You can tell with every news network and story you hear, each commentator is kind of either pro-Ukraine by the way they pose the questions, and occasionally they're neutral. Sometimes they're coming from the Trump point of view, but it's so clear when they're asking questions.
Of their territory that is occupied by Russia will not be returned to Ukraine. So that's been put out there. I mean, what's Russia giving up in all of this?
And again, this is the devil in the details, and we have to start from a realistic position here. Can Ukraine, short of direct involvement of European countries, the United States, to help fight in the conflict, short of that, does Ukraine have the capacity to eject the Russians out forcefully from Crimea and the 5 oblasts that President Putin annexed? Now, 2 of those 5 oblasts were never part of the Russian Republic, going back to Khrushchev's time. So there is a historical precedent for a negotiated where this line of control will be. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that the world has to accept Russia's annexation, whatever comes out of the negotiated solution. Again, going back to the end of World War II, no one in the West acknowledged the annexation or the occupation of the Baltic states by the Soviet Union. So again, you can have a peace, but you don't have to acknowledge where that line is necessarily.
They just have to make.
Now, we've heard from the Trump administration that if Ukraine's leadership demonstrates a good faith commitment to peace, perhaps this idea of pulling all aid will be reconsidered. We're just hearing, in fact, the Ukrainian president has said, quote, last Friday's meeting with Donald Trump was regrettable and it, quote, did not go the way it was supposed to go.
So they didn't want to come out and just say sorry, which is what they requested of him. So he kind of slightly sounded apologetic.
I mean, that sounds like an apology, regret. Is that likely to have the desired effect? Is that likely to bring about a reconsidering of this opinion by the US President Donald Trump?
Politically, an apology has some weight, some value, but quite frankly, in the geostrategic realities and open combat, it has really little relevance. What matters is that Zelensky came to D.C. There was every expectation that a deal was going to get set that would put the United States and Ukraine on track for an alignment of interest in an enduring way that would include security assurances over time. Maybe not explicit in the treaty. That clearly was what Zelensky was hoping, but that was beyond political potentials in D.C. right now. But his behavior in the White House really set things back unnecessarily. But back in Kyiv now in the last day, we're seeing positive movement by their own parliament, signaling that they acknowledge Trump's...
Now, I'm going to slide back a little bit because this story's been all over the place. So I'm going to take it back to earlier today over my side of the waters, and just find this video from GMTV, because the British networks and hosts have got
Should Sir Keir Starmer tell Donald Trump
different take on this story, especially when they do the call-ins. Trump deranged and more.
he's just gone too far now? The US president has put all military aid to Ukraine.
Listen, if you check out some of the UK stories, they're reporting at every stage, as soon as Trump tweets something else, headline comes out in the media. J.D. Vance said a comment about, I took it as he was speaking about European armies not actively fighting for 30 odd years in a major war. The British journalists took it personally. They're like, when did JD fight in a... So there's a lot of egos, there's a lot of kind of personal feelings coming into this. Talking about nations and, diplomacy and negotiating. Yet every word that comes off of JD Vance and Trump's tongue is taken personally. Well,
Ukraine on hold after his explosive meeting with Zelensky on Friday, where Trump told Zelensky that he should be more thankful for the US's support. Now, we've not heard anything from the Prime Minister yet, but he has tweeted about something else, which means he's awake, he's aware. He's just not said anything yet. So should he tell Trump that he's gone too far? Get your calls in for this one now. Paula, do you think that he should go as far as to outright say, Trump, this is one step too far?
So this is really interesting because as far as I'm concerned, the simple answer is yes. He not only should he tell him, he's got to tell him. And then we take a step back and we try and take the emotion out of it. And we all know that making peace is far harder than making war. And we also understand how important diplomacy is in the act of ensuring that we attain peace and maintain that peace, Storm. And what do we have here? Well, we have, as far as I'm concerned, in Keir Starmer, a strong leader, and we have backing him what I consider to be the Holy Trinity. So we have Keir Starmer, we have a fantastic Foreign Office, and we have the King. The three of them showed us on a world stage last week how to get things done diplomatically to ensure that us as a country are not left behind. And hopefully, as we keep being told, to bridge.
See, when the reporting is positive, it's like, yeah, they're on it. This is how you do it. As soon as any criticism or anything kind of like comes at them a little bit more challenging wise, it's like the sky's falling in.
That gap of peace. But in attaining that peace, Storm, we've got to have some tough talk.
OK. Jeff, do you think it would be appropriate? Would it be politically smart to tell Trump that he's gone too far?
I think that's the point, is politically smart, whether it is or not. And yeah, those conversations could...
And I don't get all this debating about, you must tell Trump this, you must tell the Americans, you must tell them how they must behave, how they must think, how they must give us stuff, and how they... Very strange approach. And they're throwing the insults to somebody who holds most of the cards vis-a-vis the American administration. I don't get that approach neither.
Potentially happen away from public view, but it's a subjective view on another leader's sort of internal policy, and I don't think that's the area that you can potentially be in. It's not for him to say whether or not that is a mistake. That's American policy. Personally, I'm distraught about it, but that is not necessarily the thing that Starmer could do publicly. But at this point in time, it is really quite important, given how estranged Trump is from the idea of Europe and a lot of European leaders, that there is one leader that seems to have some sort of footpath to Washington or some sort of relationship there. You know, Starmer did get a lot of credit for the trip that he had. And
what's your view on how Keir Starmer dealt with Trump on that visit?
Well, look, I mean, he just said really nice things to him and gave him a letter and he offered him a holiday.
But
so, you know,
is that what Zelensky should have done?
Not necessarily. They're very different leaders. They can operate in different ways. But
all Zelensky needed to do, he just needed to not be rude, to be appreciative of being invited to the Oval Office, calm, relaxed, and cordial. That's all. Then behind the scenes, signed the document. Both of them come out like the other leaders did, Macron and Starmer. Both stand at their pulpits, say some more complimentary things about each other, celebrate the fact that they've signed this document, which could lead to imminent cessation of fighting and stuff. And yeah, things are moving in a positive direction. Then they can get down to the hard diplomacy and talk about the kind of defense they want and sureties and who's going to keep what, who's got to give whoever what. That would have been the more sensible approach.
I took a lot of credit for that. He says,
he didn't have to do much at all.
Called him the Trump whisperer and said that he's got the ear of Trump. Well, it's I just saw his ear, sorry. But it is it's the time to say, what does that mean? What does that mean to have the ear of Trump? Is there any dividend to that? It would be good to see some evidence of it, because ever since that meeting with Keir Starmer last week, every single thing that's happened after that is the opposite of what the UK wants. So it's time for Starmer to practice some really kind of away from public view diplomacy.
And that's sort of what he's already doing, is he not, Paula? I mean, he is talking to Europe. He is letting Zelensky know that we will be there for them. Zelensky met King Charles before the second state visit. Are we doing it? Are we making a covert statement rather than an overt statement? And actually, when it comes to politics and when it comes to Trump particularly, is that not the smarter move?
Oh, and completely. And I think, oh my gosh, Storm, I am so relieved, actually. I am so relieved that the adult has now entered the room. And we've seen that with Kirsten.
Yeah, this adult business, again, I don't know, it's kind of like a backhanded kind of, you know, sarcastic rudeness. I don't know how they're going to think they can get anything good from the American side by kind of keep referring to Trump like, and the people around him like, as though they're not mature. They're all adults. It's just there's a difference of approach and opinion. So it's a poor way to go about things.
Hold on, what room has Keir Starmer entered? Because that's what we're asking now.
Yes.
Has he entered into the discussions about where we stand with Ukraine and what we need to be doing with Ukraine?
Yes, it's a world stage, isn't it? That is our room at the moment. And I appreciate that there are domestic issues that so many members of society have and want to be able to raise complaints about. We know about our farmers, we know about our pensioners, etc. But in terms of that room being the world stage, we have an...
As that lady's name is Storm, there's another storm coming soon. Because while they're lingering a bit on this Zelensky-Trump Oval Office altercation and what's going to come off of it and signing the rare minerals document, there's a tariff thing that's just hit Mexico and Canada. And if the UK ain't careful, we've separated from Europe, so it might hit the EU first. We could be second on that list after the EU to be hit with these things that are going to increase the price of virtually everything. So this poking the bear, they want to kind of reach agreements as quickly as possible, even if they end up taking the neutral role, because we don't want to be antagonizing Trump right about now.
Adult who is there representing us. And that is so important, because what we clearly don't have is somebody who says that they are a special friend to us. There are no special friends anymore that exist in terms of America. What we have is somebody who is essentially batting for the other side. And I think we need to wake up to that.
I mean,
see, this is just the thing. One thing doesn't go their way, and it's like, oh, you're our enemy now. You're batting for the other side. Okay, keep up that way of diplomacy and see what kind of dividends it pays. I don't think it's the right approach. Neutral, if possible. Poking the bear, no.
You know, you talk about whether or not he should tell him he's gone too far. I mean, something that a lot of viewers will have seen this morning in terms of going too far is Vice President J.D. Vance, who in this interview, you know, talking about the possibility of French and UK troops being on the ground, made a very dismissive comment about, you know, something about a foreign country that hasn't even fought in a war for 20 years. I think that potentially is an area where Starmer could say something, because he's got to show some strength at some point.
I think we've got...
we're so easily triggered over here in Europe.
That very clip that you're talking about, this is J.D. Vance and his comments on, I think, the UK.
That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. The security guarantee and also the economic guarantee for Ukraine is to rebuild the country and ensure that America has a long-term interest. You're not going to do that if you come to the Oval Office, insult the president, and refuse to follow his plan for peace.
So I think we're the random country, and the statement about not being to war for 30 years is clearly inaccurate.
Well, I'm sure he's going to write.
But why was he referring to the British and the French? Maybe he's talking about some of the other European countries who didn't go to Afghanistan or Iraq and take part in some of these maneuvers. I think it's a level of paranoia in, you know, the European team of, what did they say, willing partners or something like that.
Back at some point and say it was about a coalition of other European countries. But the point here is he's the vice president. So if that's the case, then choose those words. Make that point, because there's a lot, there's a lot of...
That doesn't seem to be very important in American politics at the moment.
Not to J.D. Vance,
the right words or be accurate.
Well, J.D. Vance also is manoeuvring for a space on the world stage. He's looking at the succession. And, you know, there's this state visit for Trump. I think there's a lot of ex-British Scotties that served in Iraq and Afghanistan that would love J.D. Vance to come over on the next visit. They'd love to say hello to the guy, meet him and share.
Is that some kind of threat? This is what I don't get when they make these strange remarks. Just come out of it. Say what you mean. Say how you feel. Don't do this skirting around it. Like, yeah... I'll meet you on the street one day and repeat that to my face. That's kind of what he's saying. I could be getting it wrong, though.
I'm sure J.D. Vance won't be doing that. Gwen from Kerrydiggy, you're first on the line. Do give us a call, 0207 862 2222. Do you think that Keir Starmer should actually take a stance, quite an overt stance with Trump, and say, listen, you have gone too far now? Gwen, what do you think?
Yeah. Do you think he should do that? Just putting that out there. Future shows, I'm going to try and promote them an hour in advance or something like that. That people know. Doesn't matter where you're based. If you want to call in, the number is +44. If you're outside the UK, 7. Give me a moment. Yeah, so if you're outside the UK, the number is +44 7307 355 335. Excuse me, 104. So that's +44 7307 335 104. Or if you're UK based, it's simply 07307 335104. If you want to call in, debate, join the discussion, or if there's something particularly important to you that you would like us to pull up and have a look at, I'm for it. If you'd rather be brought in on webcam, if you have a phone, tablet, computer, that's all you need. Message me. I'll send you a link. I can bring you into the live. All views are welcome. So, just to let you know for future shows.
I think he should.
Be aware.
Do you think that would be a politically smart move, considering Trump isn't the best at taking constructive criticism?
I'm afraid it's time he was treated just like he behaved.
Well, that would be interesting. What do you think the consequences to that would be? Do you think he would...
No one stands up to Trump. He's like a petulant child, and it's time...
See, this is the view we got in the UK. They keep going on about this old child and like a big baby. And I don't know how you can become a billionaire, one of the world leaders in real estate, so he's successful in his own right and other aspects of areas of business, to become the president once of any country, let alone a Western superpower, or what have you described USA, is one thing. To do it twice with a gap in between, that's no easy task. So when people throw out these remarks, oh, baby, and this and that, okay, you you run for the top seat in your country, you take on that role, and then you get there, then you can meet with other world leaders like Donald Trump, and you can face off and, you know, represent your people, the people, and really have your say. Because I don't think no non-adult baby, any of these other descriptions, could achieve 0.0% of what's needed to be in that position. So those remarks are quite strange to me.
Starmer started to say and treat the Ukraine as a proper ally. And it's time the whole of Europe backed the Ukraine against Trump, because he's a showman and he and Vance together are quite dangerous.
Yeah, because the caller says so, so everyone must do that. And 3 years, no one in Europe has been able to solve this problem without the support of Biden's admin, because they weren't trying to solve nothing neither. So, yeah, the callers have got the solutions. Yeah, just listen to the advice.
And who knows what original deal he made when he was speaking with the Russian, with Putin. And we don't know what his hidden agenda is, and we've no clue as to what they've agreed on.
No,
we bombarded the poor Ukrainian president with no respect whatsoever was appalling. So it's time that Starmer showed up and stood for what we, the British, stand for, which we should have our loyalty to the Ukrainians.
And I think Sir Keir Starmer would say that he has shown that to Ukraine. Whether we have any sort of standing in telling America what to do, not to use Trump's words completely verbatim, but doesn't America hold all the cards here? You know, what cards do we hold in telling America what they shouldn't do with regards to foreign policy?
Well, I have to say,
yes,
I don't agree with this so-called special relationship. It's all in the air. They would turn against us at the drop of a hat, regardless of anything in the past. We have to look after ourselves, and we have to look after the rest of Europe, really. We managed before without America. Okay, they came into the war when they were actually in World War II, when the Japanese got involved. But other than that, you cannot rely on Trump's word. I'm sorry, I have...
Did we ever manage without them in Europe? I'm not sure about that one.
No faith in his credibility whatsoever.
I don't disagree with a lot of what's being said there, but if you just war game what happens, so Keir Starmer comes out and publicly says Donald Trump's gone too far. What is Donald Trump going to do? He's going to unleash the gates of hell on Starmer. There'll probably be trade tariffs as well. That will push him further into this seeming alliance, or certainly empathy with the Russian position. So if the ultimate goal is to bring this war to a quicker close than it otherwise would have happened, some sort of line of communication and influence with the States is probably now the single most important thing.
All right, I'm just going to go back to our call here. Veronica from Hertfordshire, what's your thoughts on this?
Yes, well, I think it's a tricky business, because I think that when you're dealing with a petulant toddler, which is, as I see him, President Trump, you know, it's difficult to deal with. But I think it has to be said. But the trouble is, as he's a wheeler-dealer, not a proper politician, in my view, you know, he could get very aggressive. And I agree.
Listen, I think the kind of problems we've been facing in these modern times, this digital age and global world and all the rest, you kind of need a wheeler dealer in your corner to kind of thrash out some of these issues and reach a solution. Trust me, that's just what you need. And more.
I don't think the special relationship has any meaning for him whatsoever. I don't think he cares. I couldn't think he cares less about us. He cares about wheeling and dealing. And I think he's appalling, and the way he treated Zelensky was absolutely appalling, to treat him like that when his whole country has been totally decimated.
Veronica, it's certainly not what we're used to seeing politicians, or how we're used to seeing politicians behave, but maybe that's exactly what the American public are after. I mean, I don't know, but what about the calls for people to stand up to Trump? What about the calls to say, you know, when there is a bully, the bully needs to be stood up to. You can't just let the bully march all over, because basically what Trump is saying now is that I will, as a president, quite happily give some of your land away, and I have the power to do it.
Exactly, it's appalling. It's totally.
I haven't heard him say he's given away anyone's land away. The land the Russians hold, they've taken, and they're kind of holding the line on that one to start with. So, don't know if there's some kind of way something can be exchanged so the Ukrainians can get some of it back in return for something the Russians would rather have. That's all down to diplomacy. Giving something away. I've never understood the concept of giving away what you don't actually have. I never really got that one. I'm sure the call-in person does.
Wrong. So he does need somebody to stand up for him, but I think we might pay a big price for it, that's all.
Okay, Veronica, thank you very much for your call. Donald from North Yorkshire, do you think that's true? We're going to pay a big price for it if we were to tell him really how we felt?
I think you would. One thing I would think is worth mentioning or pointing out to Trump, that if he backs Putin and Putin takes over Ukraine, they're going to claim the all of the minerals that Trump is after, and he won't get them. So he's going to.
Listen, even if the Russians did take the areas with the minerals, Donald Trump has a fairly decent relationship with Putin. I'm sure that would be one of the simpler things to debate, negotiate, and do a deal on if necessary. So I think either way, he's probably going to end up with those minerals. Zelensky, if he was smart, would maybe tweak the deal somehow and sign the dotted line. Because if they want to fight on and they lose more territory, Trump's probably going to get the minerals via doing a deal with Putin. Anyway, so he doesn't lose. Win-win.
He will know that
for himself.
I see what you're saying there, Donald. I'm sure it won't be the whole of Ukraine. I don't know what the negotiations are. Obviously, I'm not involved in those calls, and quite frankly, having seen it on TV, I'm glad I'm not. But there may be a part of Ukraine that they give up, and Trump will be in charge of that, and actually, Putin will be in charge of that, and Trump will do himself out of some essential minerals that he's after.
I think he wants that deal at the end of the day, because if everything that's happened with all the rage that we saw in the Oval Office, that deal is not off the table as things stand. What's changed is the military aid, right? The deal's still on the table.
The deal's still on the table, but what we know of that deal is that Trump isn't interested in a peace process. What Trump is interested in is getting a mineral deal,
So she says, I think he's just so misunderstood by some of the commentators and stuff in these discussions on the internet. Well, I just want to play a bit of another story that later on in the week I want to look at. It's quite a long video, so we're not really going to spend much time on it today. It's David Starkey. Now, sometimes I've heard him being interviewed, and some of what he says I find quite controversial, although on this discussion I learned a lot of valuable points to do with this conflict, and it actually made a lot of things much more clearer, because you often don't hear balance on these general news stories, especially breaking news.
With Vinted's new electronics category, you can earn with no selling fees again.
It's the final conclusion of British politeness. And there's a name for it. It's when, as it were, your sensibilities, which in some ways facilitate good human relations. And again, that world that George Orwell talks about so magnificently at the end of the Second World War, the beginning of the post-war period, when he comments on England as being the kindest and gentlest society that's ever existed. Nice? But that was the homogenous England of the time. When you try and practice policing by consent or whatever in a society ridden by intercommunal difference. I'm afraid you hand power to the bad guy. If you try to be excessively nice, you commit a kind of suicide. What Europe has done.
You see, this is exactly what's been happening to us in the last 3, 4, 5, 10 years or so, particularly with this cancel culture thing and the woke era dominating a lot of the Western governments and becoming the social norm as far as policies are concerned. Listen to some of what he's got to say. Makes a lot of sense.
What we in Britain have done in particular, we've committed the suicide of niceness.
And the same, I think, can apply to a country like Sweden, which was an incredibly civilized society and has now been, sort of turned into a complete hellhole with bombings and everything else.
It's committed suicide.
Yeah, I want to ask about the European reaction to Trump, though. I think this has been fascinating. In the Munich Security Conference, J.D. Vance made this now famous speech criticizing European leaders for their policies on everything from mass migration to freedom of speech. The chairman of that conference broke down in tears. He was so upset about J.D. Vance's speech.
Do you see what I mean about sorry, just one quickly. Do you see what I mean about niceness? That man spent his entire life thinking he was being nice. He lived entirely in a world of words. And suddenly, somebody is,
This is something I've discovered as I've kind of got a little bit more knowledgeable over time with age. Charity can often have the opposite effect to what was aspired in the initial, wanting to do good motivation. Can often have the opposite effect.
It's like somebody farting in church. I mean, Vance's speech was farting in church. Here was somebody who denied the faith, who pointed out that, again, other phrases, the emperor had no clothes. Europe has been parading naked, literally naked in the world. Wow. We've been spending nothing on defense, and we've been assuming that America would protect us. We've been advancing all these claims to wonderful values, and all we've ever done is talk. And we actually destroy, as you pointed out, as I pointed out, this generalized suicidal niceness is destroying, as Dan said, the very values it's supposed to be protecting. In other words, I go back to my exchange. Right needs might at home and abroad. It needs courage. It needs all the unfashionable masculine virtues.
This is the thing, we've been in this cancel culture, woke era of demasculating the male members of the populations, particularly in the West, feminizing the young men and penalizing the older men if they want to retain usual expected male characteristics of maleness. And it's been kind of like an anti-male period. And what have we got out of it? Look at where we are. Hasn't done much good.
Because again, much of this, I will no doubt be shot down even more, is the result of the feminization of politics. It is the result of the giving priority to caring, to looking after, to protecting against risk.
Okay, let's talk about the European reaction again, like I mentioned, to Trump. The AfD did very well in the German elections, not quite well enough to form a government, but it looks like there's going to be a new German chancellor from the CDU. And he's been talking about how Donald Trump doesn't seem to care about the future of Europe, and he's talking about European independence. Ever since the end of the Second World War, the US has had a massive amount of military presence on the continent, and that has led to complaints from many on the left and the right, from nationalists who say we shouldn't be America's lapdog. Enoch Powell was a famous example of this, who was furious that Britain had basically become a kind of a sort of subservient state to the United States. Do you think that with Donald Trump's election, with his actions in Ukraine, with his kind of intimidation over NATO and so on, will this finally force...
So once again, on some of the future streams, I hope I will get a few volunteers to jump in on the stream so we get another point of view instead of just me ranting on and commenting and jumping in and slowing down the passing of information that's coming out of the clips. So yeah, it'll be more balanced than varied. So you got the number. If you do want to jump in via the phone, the number is 07307335104. If you're outside of the UK, it's the +44 7307 335 And if you want to jump in another way and come into the stream, webcam and the mic, message me and I will send you a link to your email address and bring you in onto the stream. So don't be shy, give it a try. Future live streams here at Corner Speak.
Europe to become independent of the United States for the first time since 19...
If you're watching this, I'm going to assume that you're a leader who's ambitious, driven, and accomplished, and that you worked hard.
45.
You should rephrase that question. Will it force us to spend a serious amount of money on defence? I see absolutely no sign that it will. I mean, what is allegedly, well, not allegedly, at the very moment that he's going to go across to present his backside to be caned in DC, what is Starmer doing? He's arguing about whether we should increase, perhaps over 5 years, defence expenditure from 2.3% to 2.5%, when the minimum we should be looking.
The US and Donald Trump are moving at a rapid speed. He's got 4 years. This is going to be his last term. He had a near-death experience with a bullet, taking out a piece of his ear. And I think he's come back a newly invigorated thinker. Plus, he's more learned, understanding. He's been around the block before with this presidency thing. So the US are moving at a pace. If we can't even approach to match that pace, we might be left behind in the dust.
That is 5%. Again, look at the likely new Chancellor of Germany, Merz. He has said, he has explicitly ruled out going into a coalition with the AfD. That means he will have to go into coalition, once again, bizarrely, with Scholz's party, with the SDP. They are absolutely opposed to any serious increase, as far as I can see, in military expenditure. They're absolutely opposed to any serious control of immigration. They're absolutely opposed to anything that actually needs to be done. France is bankrupt. The rumours are that it will actually require the equivalent of a bailout from the European Bank. I mean, what are we going to do? The only countries, again, let's be quite serious about this, Europe does not exist. Can we stop talking about it? To go back to those wonderful realists of the 19th century, Count Metternich, the Chancellor of the Austro-Hungarian, well, he wasn't, it was then the Habsburg Empire, the Chancellor of the Habsburg Empire says Italy is a geographical expression. It's not a country. Europe is simply a geographical expression. Even those bits of it that belong to the EU. The only countries that are taking this seriously are the countries that need to take it seriously. Finland is taking it seriously because it's got a border with Russia and it's only just recovered its full independence from the monstrosities of the Russian invasion. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, above all, now the most successful economy in Europe, that is genuinely rearming because they see the necessity. Do I think Germany is going to free itself?
Until you get to hear an interview like this and you get to hear a speaker like David Starkey, because most of the people you hear in the media, they're saying the same thing, and it's like you get the good side, you get the bad side. Of course, we're always on the good side, and they're always chasing the same bad side. And if you don't agree with them, you are parroting talking points of the bad side, and you don't understand the thing. So when you hear somebody who's just laying the pieces out in front of you, so you kind of like make of it what you will, you hear another completely different outlook to this global, European, and even national position. I mean, France virtually bankrupt. I never would have thought so. You don't hear it in the media. You think that would be a big story.
From this extraordinary politics of the naked emperor? No, I don't. Do I think Italy will? Do I think Spain will? No, I don't. Do I think Britain will? It is impossible under this government. And we've got to recognise this. It is a genuine, Stephen, genuinely terrifying position. We have, on the one hand, the government and again, the opposition. The opposition, in many ways, were even worse. Talking, what do we have to do? We've actually got to put Putin on trial before the International Criminal Court, uttering these blood-curdling threats when we couldn't resist. I would reckon we could resist a Russian attack for about 2 days.
Catch that bit. Let me run that again. You have to hear that.
We couldn't resist. I would reckon we could resist a Russian attack for about 2 days. If we were lucky.
Now you have to hear that once more. To let it digest.
We couldn't resist. I would reckon we could resist a Russian attack for about 2 days, if we were lucky. In other words, we've got this politics of absolute fantasy, of confusion, of purpose, of ignorance, and unbelievable ignorance. It's terrifying. And I see no evidence of anybody seriously in power, in other words, anybody in the cabinet. I don't see any evidence of anybody in the civil service. In a funny way, Mandelson at least has some understanding of reality. The one thing nobody could ever accuse Peter of doing is not having a very shrewd sense of reality. That may be putting it rather politely, but nevertheless, I'm much confident. But he's a wholly exceptional figure.
Sticking with the theme of Germany and the German elections,
some
people may be surprised.
While we're on Europe, I want to just wrap up and have a listen to what
Age of Empires.
France 24 had to say.
It's here. The mobile version is finally out.
They often offer an interesting, if not refreshing, point of view of what's going on in Europe and the European take.
US aid to Ukraine has been suspended. The White House putting a pause on military assistance to the country until it says they feel that Kyiv is committed to finding a peace deal. US President Donald Trump once again criticised Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, saying he should be more appreciative, but also suggested that that minerals deal was still on the table. Vice President J.D. Vance said that if Ukraine wants security guarantees, the best way is to give Americans an economic upside in Ukraine.
I really don't care what President Zelensky says about me or anybody else, but he showed a clear unwillingness to engage in the peace process that President Trump has said is the policy of the American people and of their president. That's the real breakdown, is I think Zelensky wasn't yet there, and I think frankly now still isn't there, but I think he'll get there eventually. He has to. This is not going to make anybody happy. The Russians are going to have to give up stuff. The Ukrainians are going to have to give up stuff. You can't come to the Oval Office and say, give us security guarantees. We won't even engage with you about what we're willing to give up. That's been the Ukrainian posture. When that posture changes, as President Trump said, when they're willing to talk peace, I think President Trump will be the first person to pick up the phone.
Our international affairs commentator Douglas Herbert joins us on set now to take a closer look at it all.
I mean, that sounds fair enough. That sounds quite reasonable. I don't see anything triggering, hurtful, insulting to the Europeans or painful about that statement. It sounds quite factual. The European response?
Well, Douglas, firstly, maybe take us through exactly what has been halted. What is Ukraine not getting?
Well, first, let's look. As of January 20th, right, Trump's inauguration day, under the Biden administration, since the full-scale invasion by Russia of Ukraine 2022, you had about $66 billion in pure military aid delivered to Ukraine from...
And this is another good point, because often you'll find, even in the last 3 to 5 days, a lot of mentions, there's been a lot of mentions of these different figures that US has given to Ukraine. Europe have lent and given in the form of grants to Ukraine. And there's this argument that, oh, Europe has given more. Bearing in mind, Europe is an amalgamation of countries. US is one country, and they're like, oh, they've given more than the US. The US has given maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 billion below the 100 and something billion, or I don't know if it's 200 and something billion that Europe has given. I think it's just under 200 billion Europe has given America has given, they said something like 160 something billion, or something around that figure, 130 billion roughly, and Europe has given like 160 billion, so 20-30 billion difference. Europe, again, is an amalgamation of countries. US is one country. So when you look at it in that context, that's a huge amount. Not one of those countries, not one of our countries in Europe could match US's contribution. It is a big ask from the taxpayer. So it all is not equal in this global thing. It's never been reported clearly. Trump had the little spat with Zelensky when he was trying to correct him and saying, no, you haven't given us this amount or that amount. And they're saying Trump is exaggerating the figure. It's still a huge amount, whichever way they look at it. And from this guy, the way he explains it, it makes it very clear. Some of the money is being given in terms of weapons and arms and goods, and some of the money has been for the military efforts. Other money has been to keep the country going, the government, the civil service, the ordinary people's needs. So there's a lot of money being transferred. When you put it all together, it starts to look like the US have given a much more huge, larger amount to this effort. You check what he has to say.
From the United States. In addition to that, and we don't talk about this as much, you had about $174 billion in financial and humanitarian aid, totally separate from military. A lot of that money was to pay things like teachers and doctors in Ukraine, essentially keep the government running. That was a big component as well. But we're talking here about military aid. There have been several categories of aid from the United States, but much of it considered really essential because the U.S. was able to supply types of weapons not available elsewhere coming from European countries. Up at the top of the list have been sort of the air defense systems. And the stars of that list have been the Patriot surface-to-missile air defense systems. There were about exactly three of them delivered from the United States to Ukraine. Obviously, for Zelensky, not enough. It's never quite enough. But they were extremely important in terms of giving Ukraine cover, some modicum of cover from constant Russian aerial bombardment. Also, you had these Stinger anti-air defense missiles, which were supplied by the United States as well. You had howitzers, you had mortars, heavy artillery, plus millions of rounds of ammunition to go with those howitzers, to go with those mortars. You had tanks, including the Abrams tank. You'll remember there had been a lot of debate over these heavy armored tanks for a while. They ultimately were delivered to Ukraine under the Biden administration. Helicopters as well. All of these essential components, and all of these now, at least temporarily, under Donald Trump's latest order, have been suspended. Now, there is estimates of about $1 billion of material which are on order or in the pipeline, which are immediately going to be affected by this suspension. I will note that the type of aid that was given to Ukraine from the United States came in two major distinct categories. One was called PDA, which is the Presidential Drawdown Authority. It's not new weapons from defense manufacturers. It's rather the drawdown of already existing Pentagon defense stocks in the U.S. So those are just a matter of shipping them out, taking them out of the warehouse. Then you had strategic assistance weapons, and that was literally weapons, new weapons, under contract with America's defense manufacturers, weapons made, delivered to Ukraine. Obviously, that takes time. It could take months, in some cases even years, to get those weapons produced and then shipped to Ukraine and then deployed on the battlefield. Those two...
What I've been hearing is when the European, what do they call them now, coalition of the willing, when they speak of what they can do to offer Ukraine assistance, I mean, they've come up with this figure of 800 billion as a combination of the different countries contributing. That's a massive amount of money. Though, when they break down the timeline, how this money is going to reach the Ukrainians, they're talking about years now, maybe up to 2028 or beyond. So it's not like we're going to write you a check today, tomorrow, next week, or next month, even next year. So, you know, the amounts that they can actually get to the Ukrainians sooner are vastly smaller. Weaponry, from what I understand, these weapons that aren't passed on from current stocks they have to be manufactured. Orders have to be put in. Parts have to be gathered, and these things are very timely processes. So I think we're struggling in Europe to even reach our own targets when it comes to, orders for weapons and munitions and such things. So when it comes to this stepping into the breach and taking up the slack, if the US decides to step aside, I don't think it's possible. As some commentators often say, it's for the birds.
Forms of shipments, both right now, are affected, although it is unclear legally whether or not contracts that may have been signed with defense contractors can also simply be torn up and shredded under this new order, or whether some of them will still be honored. But what we do know is that the intention, at least as of now, is to temporarily suspend any form of military materiel going from the United States to Ukraine until, as Trump sees it, Zelensky is, quote, ready for peace.
So if Zelensky doesn't come round, he and his people are on the clock. And us over here in Europe, because at a certain point in time, they're going to start running out of ammunition and munitions. And at that point, if the Russians decide to press on further with their military campaigns, they're going to be in some difficulties. As I hear it, both sides are looking, they know peace are coming, both sides are looking to, have probably their final large campaigns where they can take territory or delve a big blow to the other side, and then they'll have to start talking peace and what's not. With this cessation of, aid, I think Ukraine might not even have that time to play. So Zelensky really has to do some thinking and come to his senses and find a solution that doesn't involve continuing the war, which it seemed like was his original game plan.
So where does this leave Ukraine then in its defense efforts?
With, as I said earlier, with 1.5 hands tied behind its back. Does it leave Ukraine completely defenseless? No. But Zelensky has been clearer than anyone else in laying out what the implications are. He has said, if we cannot join NATO, and that is something that both Putin and Trump and Europe to a certain degree have taken off the wish list for now. If it can't join NATO, he says, we have to build NATO on our own territory. And what Zelensky has been doing is trying to put deeds behind those words in the form of ramping up Ukraine's own domestic missile manufacturing capacity.
Another thing I've noticed recently in the last few days, I think for a moment he tried to do this play where he thought he can play Europe against the US, and Trump let it slide for a while, and then I think he stepped in and said, right, game over, yes, get down to business, stop all the arms to Ukraine. If you don't want to come and talk peace with the other peacemakers, you do you. At some point, you're going to have to come round due to necessity.
A lot of missiles, and also, namely, we talk about drones all the time. Drones have become sort of the new weapons of war. Low cost, technologically not always very hard to build. Russia's been using tons of them. Ukraine's been using tons. Ukraine has manufactured over 1 million drones by some estimates for this war. And these drones have been used often with quite devastating effect, mainly against Russia's infrastructure, to hit especially oil refineries. Oil refineries have been the backbone of Moscow's war effort. The revenues from oil and gas, to a lesser extent, have been used to fund Putin's war machine.
Like that one when they was trying to say Putin blew up his own pipeline, when that's the pipeline that was bringing in their revenue, selling oil and gas to the West. What kind of sense does that make? So whoever was behind it, they're playing a risky game of bringing other NATO countries into this war. And at that point, it's game over. Everybody's involved. No one wants that to happen, apart from maybe a few players.
his machine of aggression against Ukraine, have allowed him to continue pressing on full throttle with this war. So Ukraine has been using those drones in order to take aim at oil refineries. By some estimates, Russia's oil production capacity has been cut by about 10–15%. So that's what Ukraine is going to have to concentrate perhaps more and more on in the absence of the heavier war material that obviously you can't really wage an effective war without. The drones help, but they do not a battle against a Russian aggressor make.
Okay, Douglas, thanks indeed for that one. I'm going to bring...
Wow, very interesting. So I'm going to wrap it up at that point. So much going on. By the time I've, added a few bits and pieces in the description of this video, much would have changed because everything's moving that fast. It's like the whole complete script is probably going to be something different by 7–8 this morning on either side of the globe. So it's a rapidly changing story. I mean, I truly hope that, at some point, they reach the point where they're around the table and they're talking about ceasefire, discussion towards peace, and whatever comes after that, divvying up the land, agreeing, disagreeing, diplomacy. Give diplomacy a chance. I know peace is just a pause within the cause between wars. You still need it. So thank you for spending some time with me here at Corner Speak. Hope to get somebody else in the studio with me, remotely or otherwise, on some of the future live streams. If you want to join me, phone in or send me your email and I'll bring you into the stream, and we'll take in this knowledge together. So once again, myself, Owen Uadia here at Corner Speak. Be good, be safe, be creative. Because for now, we out. Yeah, we are out.